$220 billion. That is more than the annual GDP of Portugal, more than the combined education and health budgets of most nations. Qatar spent it to host a football tournament that lasted 29 days. That is what Qatar spent to host the 2022 FIFA World Cup. The tournament lasted 29 days. The stadiums seated a combined capacity of approximately 400,000 people per match day. The country hosted 1.4 million visitors in a desert nation of 2.9 million permanent residents. FIFA's total revenue from that same four-year cycle, $7.5 billion. Qatar's total revenue from ticket sales, hospitality, and tourism during the tournament, estimates from independent economists range between $2.3 and $4.1 billion. The arithmetic is not complicated. It is just never presented in the same sentence. 220 billion out, at most 4 billion in. And the organization that generated 7.5 billion from the same event paid zero in corporate income tax. This is not a tournament. This is a business model, and understanding it requires three mechanisms, none of which appear in the opening ceremony. Let's begin. Before the mechanisms, what this business actually sells. The game is not the product. The game is the mechanism that generates the product. 1.5 billion people watched the 2022 World Cup final, not in Qatar, not in the stadium, through a screen, in 193 countries, across every time zone, in every language. The stadium held 88,000 people. The audience for the final alone was 1.5 billion. The cumulative audience across all 64 matches of the tournament exceeded 5 billion. The broadcast right to reach that audience, that is the product. FIFA does not sell football. FIFA licenses the right to broadcast football to national networks, streaming platforms, and media conglomerates, who then reach those billions of viewers. The match is the mechanism. The license is the revenue. The host country builds the venue so the match can happen. The match happens so the broadcast exists. The broadcast exists so the license can be sold. FIFA sells the license. FIFA captures the revenue. The stadium is the infrastructure that makes the product possible. The host country pays for the infrastructure. FIFA keeps the product. This reframes everything that follows. Mechanism 1. The FIFA revenue model. FIFA is a non-profit association registered in Switzerland under Article 60 of the Swiss Civil Code. It pays no corporate income tax on its primary revenue streams. It has no public shareholders. It is governed by a Congress of member associations, 211 national federations, and its financial results are published annually. In the four-year cycle ending with Qatar 2022, FIFA generated $7.5 billion in total revenue. 85% of that revenue came from two sources, the sale of broadcast rights and the sale of sponsorship rights. The host country generated none of that. FIFA's cost structure for delivering the World Cup is approximately $3.5 billion per cycle. Prize money distributed to participating federations, operational costs, development programs. The remainder, approximately $4 billion per cycle, is FIFA's surplus. The host country's cost structure for delivering the World Cup is measured differently. Qatar, $220 billion. Brazil, 2014, $15 billion. Russia, 2018, $14 billion. South Africa, 2010, $3.6 billion. In every case, the host country built the infrastructure. FIFA provided the tournament. FIFA captured the broadcast and sponsorship revenue. The host country received ticket sales, a fraction of which was shared with FIFA, and the promise of tourism and legacy. The promise of tourism and legacy is where the arithmetic becomes uncomfortable. Mechanism 2. The stadium equation. A World Cup stadium is a purpose-built asset with a very specific problem. The tournament lasts 29 days. The stadium has to operate for the next 30 years. Brazil built 12 stadiums for the 2014 World Cup at a combined cost of approximately $3.7 billion. The Estadio Nacional Mané Garrincha in Brasilia, at a final cost of approximately $900 million, hosted 6 World Cup matches. After the tournament, the city of Brasilia could not sustain a professional football club capable of filling it. The stadium is documented to have hosted fewer than 500 spectators per event in its post-tournament years. Reports from journalists on the ground confirmed its partial use as a staging area for municipal vehicles. The operating costs of maintaining an empty 90,000-seat arena in a city without a top-division club are not recovered by the revenue it generates. This is not an exception. It is the pattern. South Africa 2010, Russia 2018, Greece after the 24 Olympics, Japan after the 2020 Olympics. The pattern is consistent enough that economists have a name for it: the white elephant problem. A stadium built for peak demand that exists for 4 weeks and then must survive decades of ordinary demand that was never there. The host country takes on the construction cost, the operating cost, and the post-tournament debt. The question of whether a stadium generates enough local revenue to service that debt has been studied exhaustively. The answer, consistently, is no. FIFA's design requirement is simple: build a stadium that meets our specifications, is ready on our timeline, and provides our standard of hospitality. What happens after the final whistle is not in the contract. That is not a detail. That is the architecture. Mechanism 3. The broadcasting machine. Here is the number that explains the entire model. In the 2022 cycle, FIFA's budgeted revenue from broadcast rights was approximately $2.6 billion, a figure that covers the rights sold across the full 4-year cycle. That single revenue line alone approached the entire operational cost of running the tournament. The broadcast rights model works as follows. FIFA owns the exclusive rights to all commercial exploitation of the World Cup, including broadcasting, streaming, and digital distribution. FIFA sells these rights to national broadcasters and media conglomerates in packages, by territory, for the duration of the 4-year cycle. The national broadcaster then sells advertising against the broadcast. In 2022, a 30-second advertising slot during the World Cup final in the United States sold for approximately $1 million. The broadcaster captured that revenue. FIFA had already been paid for the rights. 1.5 billion viewers for the final. 5 billion cumulative across the tournament. 193 countries. Every major advertising market on Earth tuned to the same event. There is no other asset class on Earth that delivers this simultaneously. Not the Super Bowl, domestic audience of 115 million. Not the Olympics, fragmented across 16 days and dozens of sports. The World Cup final is a single event, the most watched 90 minutes in the history of television. FIFA does not run a sports tournament. FIFA runs the world's most concentrated broadcast event and licenses the right to transmit it. The football is real. The players are real, the matches are decided on the pitch, but the business is the broadcast. The business has always been the broadcast. The stadium is the infrastructure that makes the broadcast technically possible. The host country is the entity willing to build that infrastructure. In 2026, the United States, Canada, and Mexico will host the expanded 48-team tournament across 16 venues. FIFA's projected revenue for this cycle, $11 billion, the largest single-cycle revenue in the organization's history. The host country's combined infrastructure and operational costs have not been publicly consolidated into a single verified figure. What is documented? 16 host cities, each bearing their own fan zone costs, security contracts, transport upgrades, and hospitality infrastructure. The pattern established by every prior host suggests the aggregate will be measured in tens of billions. 11 billion, FIFA, tens of billions, the hosts. That is not a coincidence. That is the model. The record year revelation. 2022 was the most watched FIFA World Cup in history. 1.5 billion viewers for the final alone. 5 billion cumulative across the tournament. Record broadcast rights revenue. Record sponsorship revenue. FIFA's $7.5 billion cycle was the highest in the organization's 118-year history. In that record year, with 5 billion cumulative viewers and every broadcast metric at its peak, Qatar's net economic position from the tournament was a loss measured in the hundreds of billions. The academic consensus on World Cup economic impact is consistent across 3 decades of data. IMF analysis, Oxford University research, and independent economic studies of Brazil, South Africa, and Russia all reach the same conclusion. The expected GDP multiplier from hosting a major international sporting event does not materialize. Tourism frequently decreases during the tournament as regular visitors avoid overcrowded infrastructure. The businesses that benefit are hotels, food service, and transportation, not the heavy infrastructure that consumed the construction budget. The record year was FIFA's best year. It was not the host country's best year. The sport had its best year. The host had its worst. The contract produced both outcomes simultaneously. The problem was not the tournament, it was the contract. And this asymmetry was not hidden. It was in the bid documents. It was in the contract language. It was in the economic studies that every host government commissioned before submitting its bid. Every signal was visible. Every signal was rationalized away. That is what buried economics means. The final calculation. 2 scenarios, same tournament, different positions. Scenario A, FIFA, investment, approximately $3.5 billion in operational costs per cycle. Revenue, $7.5 billion. Net surplus, approximately $4 billion. Tax rate, 0. The asset is intellectual property, broadcast rights and the World Cup brand, which appreciates with each cycle and requires no physical infrastructure to maintain. Scenario B, Qatar, investment, $220 billion. Revenue from the tournament, approximately $1.5 billion. Net position, negative $218.5 billion. Before ongoing stadium operating costs, before debt service on infrastructure bonds, before the long-term maintenance of facilities built for 29 days of peak demand. Both parties sign the same contract. The contract governs the same event. The outcomes are not comparable. FIFA's asset, the World Cup broadcast rights, does not depreciate. It generates more revenue every 4 years. The 2026 cycle will generate $11 billion. The 2030 cycle will generate more. The intellectual property compounds. The host country's asset, the stadium, depreciates from the moment the final whistle blows. It requires ongoing maintenance, staffing, and operational subsidy. In most cases, it is worth less in year 5 than it was on the day of the opening match. One party in this contract holds a compounding asset. One holds a depreciating one, both paid to enter. The closing. The World Cup is real. The football is real, the goals are real. The emotion in those stadiums is real. 1.5 billion people watching the same final. That is a genuinely extraordinary human event. What is also real is the contract that sits beneath it. The host country builds the infrastructure. The host country absorbs the operating risk. The host country holds the stadium for 30 years after the tournament ends. FIFA holds the broadcast rights. FIFA sells those rights again in 4 years. FIFA's asset compounds. The stadium depreciates. $220 billion spent, between 2.3 and 4.1 billion recovered, 7.5 billion captured by FIFA. The arithmetic is not hidden. It is published in FIFA's annual report. The tournament is the product the world sees. The broadcast license is the product the business sells. The host country is the entity that makes the product technically possible and pays for the privilege of doing so. The host pays. FIFA profits. That is not an opinion. That is the contract.